Why people pull away from you and why it's not a bad thing. People don't always distance themselves because you're wrong. Sometimes your presence simply brings things to light they're not ready to face. You walk into a room and the energy subtly shifts. It's not necessarily admiration, it's discomfort. Not because you're loud, but because you're authentic. And in a world that thrives on filters and facades, authenticity can feel intense. But you're not too much. You're grounded. You've done the inner work. You carry a calm confidence that doesn't need validation. And when you show up like that, you don't need to say much. Your presence speaks volumes. That's the Stoic way. Calm, unshaken, secure in who you are. The more you embody that, the more clearly you'll see who's truly ready to meet you at your level. If that resonates, feel free to hit subscribe. No pressure, just appreciation. Now let's explore why your presence can shift a room, even in silence. Most people walk into a space hoping to be noticed. You walk in and people notice, without you trying. It's not about what you're wearing or how loud you are. It's something deeper. You feel anchored, present. You're not seeking approval because you've already found it within yourself. And that quiet assurance disrupts the usual flow. People pause, not because they're afraid, but because your presence carries weight. In a world that rewards noise and performance, quiet power stands out. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When you choose stillness over reaction, presence over performance, it can confuse people who are used to constant external validation. You don't speak just to fill the silence. You've outgrown the need to over-explain, over-give, or over-perform just to feel seen. Now you understand that real power comes from mastering your inner world. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." That quiet awakening? People feel it, even if they can't name it. It's not that you're intimidating, it's that you're awake. And many people aren't used to that. You've also stopped apologizing for making others uncomfortable. That's not your burden. When people feel uneasy around you, it doesn't mean you're too much. It often means they're not used to someone that's steady, clear, and grounded. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Your presence invites others to reflect, and not everyone's ready for that. Psychologically, people are drawn to the familiar, even if it's chaos or insecurity. So when you walk in calm, confident, and self-contained, you break the pattern. And patterns, when broken, always draw attention. Some people will be inspired by it. Others will pull away. But few will ignore it. You've cultivated emotional control. You don't let the room define you. You define the room just by being you. Aristotle believed, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." And you've taken that to heart. You know your values. You've learned when to speak and when silence is stronger. You know not every battle is yours to fight. Not every spotlight is meant for you. And that's okay. That kind of restraint is powerful. It's not just self-control. It's self-respect. In a culture that expects oversharing and constant engagement, you stand out by simply holding space. You listen. You observe. And when you speak, it's intentional. That kind of presence doesn't just enter a room, it redefines it. You're living what Epictetus taught. No man is free who is not master of himself. You've let go of the need to explain yourself. You've stopped justifying your silence, and in doing so, you've become a mirror, reflecting back to others where they haven't yet found that same freedom. Not everyone can handle that, but that's okay. You weren't made to fit into every room. You were made to raise the frequency of the ones that match your presence. So stay grounded. Let your silence do the talking. Because the more rooted you are in who you are, the less you'll feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Most people say they want honesty, until they actually hear it. It's strange how the truth, even when spoken gently, can sting if someone's been avoiding it. You've probably noticed that. You don't pretend. You don't do small talk just to pass time. You don't smile just to avoid tension. You speak from the heart. And when something's not right, you name it. Not to be harsh, but because you care. And that's rare. The quiet power of truth. You care enough to be honest. That kind of honesty is rare and often misunderstood. People may call you harsh, cold, or too much. But what they're really saying is, you made me feel something I wasn't ready to feel. Plato once said, "No one is more hated than he who speaks the truth." And when your truth isn't just in your words, but in your presence, in your energy, it holds a mirror up. It invites others to face parts of themselves they've kept hidden. We live in a world that thrives on surface-level talk, on filters, distractions, and performance. But you're not wired that way. You're not here to blend in. You were never meant to smile and nod when something inside you says, "This isn't real." Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." That's why your honesty can feel like a disruption, not because it's aggressive, but because it's clear. And clarity reveals what others have spent a long time avoiding. Think about that friend who asked for your opinion, but recoiled the moment you gave it. They weren't looking for truth. They were looking for comfort. And you gave them truth anyway, because flattery just isn't in your nature. That moment, the pause, the flinch, that's what sets you apart. You're not a mirror designed to flatter. You're a mirror that reflects clearly, calmly, honestly. From a Stoic perspective, honesty isn't just a virtue, it's a duty. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because growth often begins in discomfort. And sometimes being honest means being misunderstood in the short term, but respected in the long run. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You need to be trusted by the ones who matter. There's a deeper reason why truth has impact. Truth creates friction, and friction is how growth begins. Not everyone is ready for that, but the ones who are, they'll remember what you said long after the moment has passed. They'll think of your words in quiet moments. Maybe they won't say it out loud, but they'll know. You were the one who told them the truth when no one else would. Aristotle called courage the first of all human virtues because it makes all the others possible. That includes the courage to be real, to be the one in the room who won't pretend just to keep the peace. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. You've likely been called too honest more than once, but really what they mean is, you're willing to say what I'm not ready to admit. And that's not just honesty. That's leadership. There's a kind of awareness that doesn't come from words. It comes from what's left unsaid. And you feel it. You pick up on it. Like your attention is tuned to something others haven't learned to hear yet. Someone walks into a room with a bright smile, the right words, the right laughter, but you notice the tension in their shoulders, the flicker in their eyes, the quiet unease they carry. You don't point it out, but you feel it. That's not magic. That's emotional intelligence. It's intuition, shaped by experience, by reflection, by pain, by growth. Jung also said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That's what you've done, brought awareness to the unconscious, in yourself and quietly in others. You see what's under the surface, and that's not always easy, for you or for the people you reflect it back to. But it's necessary. Socrates believed wisdom begins in self-awareness, and that's where your clarity comes from, not from a desire to be right, but from a deep commitment to what's real. It all starts with self-awareness, and once you begin to see yourself clearly, that clarity naturally begins to extend outward. You don't just understand yourself, you begin to understand others too. Their patterns, their wounds, their energy, and that makes people feel seen. Sometimes a little too seen. Because the truth is, most people aren't entirely comfortable being read that easily. It can feel vulnerable, exposed. When you see past the persona, past the performance, it strips away the illusion. And if someone's built their identity around that illusion, it can be unsettling. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your presence makes it hard for them to keep pretending. So when you get that gut feeling, trust it. You don't need to overanalyze it. That quiet internal signal? It's not a guess. It's intuition, refined through reflection, silence, and solitude. The Stoics called it proairesis, the ability to choose your response based on inner clarity. Your intuition is part of that. It's your mind's quiet way of recognizing truth, often before your logic has caught up. Some people light up a room with words. You light it up with presence. There's a natural pull to that kind of energy. People are drawn to it, curious about it, maybe even hoping to absorb a little of it. But what they don't expect is the mirror. Because being around someone real doesn't just feel comforting, it can feel confronting. You're not performing. You're not following the usual social script. You show up grounded, whole, unfiltered. And for those unfamiliar with that kind of presence, it can be disorienting, like standing near a fire. It's warm, yes, but it also makes you suddenly aware of how cold your hands have been. That's the nature of your presence. It doesn't expose people by judging them. It does so just by being authentic in a world that often isn't. Plato once said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." And you don't use your energy to control or manipulate. You just are. But even that, just being fully yourself, is powerful. Because when others are still figuring out who they are, your self-assurance can feel like intensity. It makes them question their stories, their masks, their comfort zones. Carl Jung wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your own heart." And that's the kind of clarity people feel when they're around you, even if only for a moment. For some, that's inspiring. For others, it's a little intimidating. It reminds them of everything they've been avoiding. So if someone steps close, then backs away. Don't take it personally. Your energy might simply be asking a question they're not yet ready to answer. And that's okay. Not everyone is meant to stay. But the ones who do, they're the ones ready to grow alongside you. Some people avoid solitude like it's a punishment. You treat it like a privilege. While others reach for noise to escape themselves, you found strength in the quiet. That doesn't mean you're cold or antisocial. It means you found something valuable, something rare. Your peace doesn't come from approval. It comes from alignment. In a world that's constantly connected, solitude can be misunderstood. If you're not posting, performing, or surrounded by people, others start to wonder what's wrong. But maybe nothing's wrong. Maybe for the first time, everything is right. Because when you're alone, you're not lonely. You're in tune. You hear your thoughts clearly. You feel your emotions fully. No filters, no noise, just you. The Stoics understood the value of solitude. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And it's in solitude that we begin to see that difference clearly. You get to ask, what's mine to carry? And what's just noise from the outside world? Aristotle once called contemplation the highest human activity. Why? Because when you're not constantly reacting, you gain the space to choose how to respond. That space between stimulus and response, that's where your strength lives, and it's where your clarity sharpens. Carl Jung observed, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. You've probably felt that quiet ache of being in a room full of people, yet feeling unseen. Because what you crave isn't just company, it's connection. And that kind of depth begins in solitude. So don't let anyone make you feel strange for enjoying your own space. Don't shrink your silence to make others more comfortable with their chaos. Your time alone isn't empty. It's sacred. It's where you recalibrate, reflect, and rebuild. It's where you nurture the kind of peace that doesn't shake when the world does. Eventually, you realize chasing doesn't work. Not for people, not for love, not for recognition. And when that realization settles in, so do you. You stop bending yourself to fit into spaces you've outgrown. You stop explaining your worth to those who can't or won't see it. You stop knocking on doors that were never meant to open. That's not bitterness, it's clarity. You're not cold, you're clear. You're not distant, you're discerning. And there's a difference. Because once you've done the inner work, once you've faced your own shadows and learned how to hold space for yourself, you no longer need to prove your light to anyone. Your energy changes. It stops reaching. It starts attracting. What's meant for you begins to move towards you, not because you chased it, but because you aligned with it. This is what the Stoics meant by self-sufficiency. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if thou wilt always look." That strength, the kind that comes from within, is the reason you no longer need to chase. When you know your value, you're not afraid to stand alone. Others might misread that. They might see your peace as pride, your space as indifference. But really, you've just raised your standards. You're not desperate for connection. You're intentional with it. You've learned. Just because something feels good in the moment doesn't mean it's aligned with your growth. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And learning to be at peace with yourself, that's a habit. That's why your energy feels steady. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've stopped trying to prove at all. So when the urge comes to chase, to explain, to convince, pause. If it's meant for you, it won't require you to abandon yourself to have it. Stay rooted, stay intentional, because the more aligned you become, the more naturally the right people and opportunities find their way to you. There's something about genuine calm. It speaks louder than noise ever could. You don't need to announce who you are. Your energy already speaks. It carries a quiet certainty. And that kind of presence can shake people, not because you're doing anything to them, but because it reflects something back they haven't yet found within themselves. Your stillness reveals their restlessness. Your clarity makes their avoidance visible. Your authenticity reminds them of the weight they've carried behind a mask. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So when people pull away, criticize, or project, it's rarely about you. It's about what your presence quietly reveals in them. You're not provoking. You're simply being. And that alone holds up a mirror. Not everyone is ready to look into it. The Stoics remind us, don't take it personally. Epictetus taught, when someone irritates you, it is your own response that is to blame. You've taken that to heart. You've learned how to stay grounded, even when misunderstood. Because their reaction, that's their story, not yours. Socrates believed self-awareness is the root of wisdom, and simply by being who you are, calm, clear, present, you invite others to become more aware of themselves. That's a quiet kind of gift, and not everyone is ready for it. Some will move closer, some will walk away. But either way, it brings clarity. You don't need to announce your boundaries. They're understood, felt in how you move, how you speak, how you choose not to overextend. There's something in your presence that says, I know who I am. And that unspoken clarity demands respect. People either rise to meet it or quietly remove themselves, and both outcomes serve you. You're not being distant, you're being discerning. And in a world that rewards constant performance and approval-seeking, discernment stands out. You're not bending to fit. You've done the work. You know where you end and where someone else begins. That's self-possession, and it's magnetic. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, acting in harmony with your values, your essence. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's what you're doing. You're not explaining your boundaries. You're embodying them. Because boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They're not about keeping people out. They're about keeping your energy clear. They don't scream, "Stay away." They quietly say, "If this isn't aligned, it doesn't belong here." You no longer stay where your peace is compromised. And that filter you've developed, it's not coldness, it's protection. It's how you keep your space clear of chaos, disrespect, and emotional drain. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And part of that becoming is learning what you can and cannot accept. Your boundaries aren't selfish. They're a form of self-respect. They're the quiet framework of a life built on truth. So keep them intact. Let them speak for you. You don't need to argue or over-explain. The right people will recognize and honor them. The rest will fall away. And that's not rejection. That's alignment. Socrates said, "To be is to do." And now you simply are. No disclaimers. No softening your voice to keep the peace. Because any peace that requires you to abandon yourself, that's not peace. That's quiet suffering. Jung also wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." You've done that. You've faced your light and your shadows, and chosen to honor all of it. That kind of wholeness can be disruptive, especially to those still seeking their worth through others' approval. But to live in alignment with your own nature, that's what the Stoics called true freedom. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." That's what you're doing. You're no longer performing. You're embodying. You've released the need to be understood by everyone, because you've grown into being deeply understood by yourself. And that's where real power lives. Quiet, steady, unshakable. So let them misunderstand. Let them mislabel. Even let them walk away. That's not your loss. That's space being made for clarity, for connection, for people who see you and rise to meet you. Your energy is no longer something to explain or negotiate. It's sacred. And the right ones? They won't just accept it. They'll recognize it. You are never too much. You are simply real in a world still learning how to be. So stay on your path. Stay true to your light. And never shrink to soothe someone else's shadow. If this message resonated with you, there's another video on the screen that will speak to the same part of you. Thank you for spending this time here with Stoic Mindset Mastery, a space for the thinkers, the feelers, the ones who lead with quiet power. See you soon.